Get the owner on the phone now! Sloane's scream sliced through the dining room like a knife. Every diner whipped their heads around. I sat in my corner booth, my coffee half finished, when my daughter-in-law burst into the main dining room. She was latched onto my son Justin's arm, trailing a group of fashion-forward friends. Sloane wore a blood-red designer dress that oozed money, and her jewelry flashed under the crystal chandeliers. And then she saw me, her face curdled into a mask of pure disgust. "What on earth is this old woman doing here?" The words spat out of her mouth like venom, loud enough for half the room to hear. I felt every gaze drill into me. My worn gray cardigan, my comfortable shoes, my hair pulled into a simple bun. I was the smudge on their perfect night. Justin rushed over, his face flushed. Not with indignation at how his wife treated me. He was ashamed of me. "Mom," he hissed through clenched teeth. "What are you doing in a place like this? Look at how you're dressed. My God, this is humiliating. My own son, my only child." The words punched me in the chest, but I held my cool. My hands shook slightly around the coffee cup, but I didn't say a word. Sloane was already snapping her fingers at the waitstaff, her voice climbing in pitch. "I need the manager now. This woman does not belong here. This is a high-end place, not a shelter. Get her out now." Murmurs filled the space. Elegant couples at nearby tables watched us with a mix of gawking curiosity and clear disapproval. Some women looked at me with pity, others with disdain, as if my mere presence stained the refined air. Justin's and Sloane's friends choked back uncomfortable chuckles. One of them muttered something about people who don't know their place. Justin leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. "Mom, please. We're here with important investors. You're going to wreck everything. Can't you just leave? There are cheap diners up on the north end. Go there. Investors, big shots. Same story every time. I was never enough for them. Never stylish enough, modern enough, or useful enough." Sloane kept windmilling her hands, her voice borderline hysterical. "This is unacceptable. We pay a fortune to eat in an exclusive atmosphere, and this shows up. Where is the owner? I want the owner right now." She jabbed a finger at me as if I were trash that needed to be hauled out. Her friends bobbed their heads, whispering about the nerve of certain people. A young server inched over, trying to calm things down. Sloane cut him off before he could speak. "I don't want excuses. I want the manager. I want the owner. Someone needs to answer for this." The poor young man bolted toward the back offices. Justin dodged my gaze completely, plastering a tight smile at his investors, trying to downplay the scene. I remained sitting, feeling as though 66 years of life had been shrunk to this moment of absolute humiliation. My own son wanted to erase me from his existence. The seconds crawled like hours. Sloane used every beat to pour gas on the fire. I just can't believe it, can you? You come to celebrate, to close important deals, and you run into this mess. She probably snuck in without a reservation, or worse, someone felt sorry for her and let her in. Her friends laughed. That mean girl laughter familiar to women who enjoy stepping on others. One of them added, "Poor dear." She probably saw the place from the sidewalk and thought she could pretend she belonged. The laughter swelled. Then Tony Harper appeared. The restaurant manager walked toward us with calm, practiced elegance. Impeccable suit, upright posture, a professional smile that gave away nothing. Sloane pounced immediately. "Finally. Get this woman out of here immediately. She's wrecking everyone's experience. Look at how she's dressed. This is embarrassing for your place." Tony listened in silence, nodding once, his expression stone flat. Then his eyes settled on me. For a second, something flickered in his gaze. Something Sloane missed because she was too busy soaking in her moment of power. Justin chimed in, his voice trying to sound authoritative. "Look, we don't want a bigger scene. Handle it discreetly. Take her out through the kitchen exit if you have to." Through the kitchen, as if I were garbage that didn't even deserve to use the main door. Tony took a deep breath. Then, with a composure that made Sloane's theatrics look silly, he turned completely toward me. His next words landed like grenades in the restaurant's expectant silence. "Madam Proprietor, how would you like me to proceed with these patrons?" "Proprietor?" The word hung in the thick air. I watched Sloane's expression freeze. Justin's eyes went wide and the murmurs cut off. Tony waited for my answer with absolute respect, his hands folded, his posture almost reverent. I still hadn't moved a muscle, my coffee now cold between my unsteady fingers. 66 years old, 5 years widowed, a lifetime spent building something my own children knew nothing about. And there I was, in my restaurant, being treated like an obstacle by the family I gave everything to. The silence that followed was deafening. Proprietor. That word kept ringing in the air like a bell. I saw Sloane blinking, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. Justin had paled by 3 shades, his hand gripping the back of a nearby chair as if he needed actual support. The investors exchanged baffled glances. Sloane's friends had stopped laughing. Tony still stood by my table, awaiting my instructions with the loyalty that only comes from years of working together and mutual respect. But I still couldn't speak. I had a knot in my throat the size of a fist, because this moment, this public humiliation at the hands of my own blood, was the capstone of 5 years of accumulated contempt. 5 years ago, when I lost my husband, I also lost my identity in my son's eyes. Bob had been my partner for 42 years. Together we built everything from scratch. We arrived in the city with nothing but big dreams and hands willing to work. He cooked, I managed. Our first restaurant was just a tiny space in a neglected part of the North End. We worked 16 hours a day. Justin grew up among tables and kitchens, doing homework amid the aroma of spices and the clatter of dishes. But he never valued that. To him, we were just restaurant people, service staff. Nothing glamorous, nothing to brag about to his private university friends. When Bob died suddenly of a massive heart attack, I was devastated. But I was also left with something Justin never knew about, a chain of 7 upscale dining establishments spread across the city. What started as that humble neighborhood spot had transformed into a culinary brand valued at several $millions. Bob and I worked in silence, reinvesting every profit, expanding strategically. We never flaunted it. We never lived in mansions. We stayed in our modest home in the North End where we started. We continued to dress simply. The money was in the businesses, in property, in investments, not in appearances. After the funeral, Justin showed up with Sloane. They'd been married for 2 years by then, but at the wake was the first time she showed me her real face. While I cried beside my husband's coffin, I heard her whisper to a friend, "Poor Justin. Now he'll have to carry the old woman. She probably can't even afford to take care of herself." Those words cut me, but I was too deep in grief to confront her. Justin said nothing. He didn't defend me or correct her. He simply nodded with resignation, as if I truly were a burden he now had to endure. The following months were telling. Justin only visited when he needed cash. "Mom, I've got expenses. The condo, the car. Sloane wants to redecorate." I always gave him money, a 500 here, 1,000 there. He never asked where the money came from. He assumed it was my husband's savings, a small widow's pension, something measly that would eventually run out. I never told him about the restaurants. I don't know why. Maybe I sensed that knowing would warp something in our relationship. Maybe I wanted to protect the last thing I had left of Bob. Maybe, deep down, I already knew my son didn't love me for who I was, but for what he could get. Sloane made everything worse. She came from a family with money, or at least that's what she loved to claim. Her father had businesses. Her mother ran charity events. Sloane went to expensive schools and traveled through Europe. To her, I was the embarrassing mother-in-law, the poor widow from the humble neighborhood. At family gatherings, she introduced me with disdain. "This is Maggie, Justin's mother. She lives in the old neighborhood where they had their little food business." Little business, as if 40 years of work were meaningless, as if Bob's sweat didn't deserve respect. 2 years ago, my grandson Aiden was born, my only grandson. When Sloane was pregnant, I knitted blankets, bought clothes, and prepared everything with the joy of a first-time grandmother. The day of the delivery, I waited 12 hours at the hospital. When they finally let me in, Sloane looked at me with annoyance. "Only 15 minutes? I'm tired, and we've got important visitors after this." 15 minutes with my grandson. That was all. In the following weeks, I tried to visit them. I brought homemade food, modest gifts. Sloane always had excuses. We're busy. The baby's sleeping. We have the pediatrician. Better another day? Another day that never came. Justin stopped returning my calls. Messages went unanswered. I kept insisting because the pain of not seeing my grandson ate me alive, until one day, 6 months ago, I showed up at their condo unannounced. I rang the bell repeatedly. Sloane opened the door with fire in her eyes. What part of "we're busy"? Don't you understand? That's enough, Maggie. You're being invasive, desperate, pathetic. The door slammed in my face. I heard Aiden crying inside, my grandson, and I was outside like an unwanted stranger. That night I cried until I ran out of tears. I called Renee, my lifelong friend. She knew the whole truth. She knew about the restaurants, the properties, everything. Maggie, Renee said firmly, you have to stop letting this happen. You are a powerful woman. Stop groveling for crumbs of affection. But I couldn't. He was my son, my only family. I kept giving him money when he asked. I kept swallowing my pride every time Sloane cut me down. I kept accepting being invisible because I was afraid of losing them completely. Afraid of being absolutely alone in this world. 3 months ago, Justin called me, first time in weeks. My heart jumped with hope. Mom, I need to see you. I thought they finally wanted to reconcile. I cooked my best meal. I straightened the house. He arrived alone, without Sloane, without Aiden. He sat in my small living room, looking around with that polished air of superiority he had perfected. Mom, I need $5,000. It's urgent. I have investments. I looked at him, really looked, for the first time in months. My son, 38 years old, wearing an expensive suit and a watch that probably cost more than my car, coming to ask his supposedly poor mother for money. Investments? I asked softly. Yeah, business stuff. You wouldn't understand. Just tell me if you have it or not. I gave him the money from the personal account where I kept cash for daily expenses. He took the envelope, didn't even count it, and left without drinking the coffee I had made him, without asking how I was, without a hug, without anything. That night Renee called me, worked up. Maggie, you need to know something. My niece works in PR. She saw Justin and Sloane at a corporate event. They're bragging they're opening their own luxury restaurant, that they have investors, that it'll be the most exclusive spot in the city. My blood ran cold. My money, my years of silent help, all to finance a dream that completely excluded me. A restaurant that would compete with mine, built with my money, without them even knowing I was their competition. That's when I decided something. I wasn't going to say anything yet. I was going to watch. I was going to see how far their contempt would go, how far they were willing to sink me before I revealed the truth. I continued my simple life, visiting my restaurants discreetly, meeting with Tony and my other managers in private offices. I kept wearing my modest clothes, living in my humble home. But inside, something had changed. The pain was transforming into something colder, harder, more final. And then came this evening, this dinner that was supposed to be quiet. This moment where my own family dragged me through the dirt in front of strangers. Tony's question still hung in the air, awaiting my answer. I slowly raised my gaze to Tony. I saw the genuine concern in his eyes, the loyalty from years of working together. But I saw something else too. He was waiting for me to finally defend myself, to set boundaries, to stop letting them walk all over me. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. Tony, please let them finish their dinner in peace. I was just leaving anyway. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly. I took my worn handbag, avoiding everyone's eyes. Tony frowned, clearly disappointed by my answer, but he nodded with professionalism. I walked past Justin without looking at him, past Sloane, who now looked confused and vaguely triumphant all at once. I left the restaurant with my head down, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes pinned on my back. Outside, the cold night air hit my face, and then finally the tears came. It wasn't the first time they had humiliated me. Lord knows it wasn't. This was simply the drop that spilled the cup that had been silently filling for years. I remembered that Christmas. 18 months ago, Sloane hosted a family dinner at their condo. She invited me, but with conditions. Maggie, please try to look presentable. Justin's parents, my family, will be here too. We don't want them to think we are. Well, you know. She didn't want them to think what? That her husband came from working people. That her mother-in-law didn't wear designer clothes. I arrived at that dinner wearing a green sweater I had bought especially for the occasion. It wasn't expensive, but it was new and fit me well. I carried a cake I had baked myself, my grandmother's recipe. I knocked on the door with my heart full of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe we could be a real family. Sloane opened it. She looked me up and down, and her smile tightened. Oh, you came. As if my presence were an unpleasant surprise when she had invited me herself. She let me in, but not to the main dining room where everyone was. She took me to the kitchen. Can you leave the cake here? Better wait a minute before coming out. Not everyone's arrived. I stood in that kitchen like an employee waiting for orders. I heard the laughter from the dining room, the animated conversations. Sloane's parents had arrived, her sister, close friends. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Finally, I walked out on my own. When I entered the dining room, the conversation abruptly stopped. Sloane practically jumped out of her chair. Maggie, so glad you came out. Look, I'll introduce you to everyone. She did so with that fake smile I knew too well. This is Justin's mother. She lives on the North End. She has a very cozy little house. Cozy little house, code for insignificant poor person. Sloane's mother, a woman with too much Botox and flashy jewelry, looked at me the way one looks at an insect. Oh, how quaint. And what did your husband do? Past tense, as if Bob didn't even deserve to be remembered. We had restaurants, I said simply. Sloane quickly interrupted. A small restaurant, comfort food, nothing fancy. It's not around anymore. A lie. She didn't know anything, but she made me seem even more insignificant. The rest of the dinner was torture. They sat me at the end of the table, as far as possible from the center of attention. No one spoke to me. When I tried to contribute to a conversation, Sloane abruptly changed the subject. My cake never left the kitchen. At dessert time, she served one bought from an expensive bakery, presenting it as if it were the only dessert of the night. When I said goodbye, Justin didn't even get out of his chair. Bye, Mom, drive safe. That was all. I got home and threw my cake in the trash. I cried over the sink, wondering when I had lost my son, when I had become an embarrassing obstacle instead of the mother who gave him everything. That night I called Renee, sobbing. She came to my house, hugged me, and let me cry on her shoulder. Maggie, that's enough. You have to stop them. How long are you going to allow this? But I couldn't. I clung to the hope that they would change, that one day Justin would remember who raised him, who loved him unconditionally. Then came Aiden's birthday. My grandson turned 1 year old. Sloane posted photos on social media of an elaborate party, themed decorations, a professional dessert table, entertainers, dozens of guests. I wasn't invited. I didn't even know about the party until I saw the photos online. My grandson blowing out his first candle surrounded by strangers, and I, his grandmother, was completely excluded. I sent Justin a message. I saw the photos from Aiden's birthday. He looked beautiful. I wish I could have been there. His reply arrived 3 hours later. It was a small party, Mom, just close family. Close family. I wasn't close family. Those words cracked something inside me that couldn't be repaired. 2 weeks later, they showed up at my house unannounced. It was Saturday morning. I was in my pajamas, my house a mess. I opened the door in surprise. Justin walked in without greeting me, looking around with disapproval. Mom, we need to talk about something important. Sloane followed him, carrying Aiden. My heart skipped a beat when I saw my grandson. I instinctively reached out my arms. Sloane moved away, shielding the baby as if I were dangerous. He's tired. They sat on my old sofa. Justin went straight to the point. Mom, Sloane and I have been talking. We need you to understand something. We have busy lives, responsibilities, a son. We can't be constantly worrying about you. Worrying. as if they ever had. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Sloane sighed big. Maggie, you're older. You live alone. Eventually, you're going to need help, care. We want to make it clear we can't be responsible for that. You should start looking into assisted living, places with people your age and professionals to look after you. They were planning my placement in a nursing home. I was 64 at the time. I was perfectly healthy, active, but to them I was already a future problem they wanted to solve in advance. I'm fine, I managed to say. I don't need help, Justin shook his head. Mom, be realistic. This house is falling apart. Your car is 15 years old. You barely have enough to live on. We can't keep subsidizing you forever. Subsidizing me. I, who had given him thousands of dollars over the years. I, who had more money than he would ever have. But I remained silent. I kept protecting my secret as if it were the only dignity I had left. Sloane added with syrupy sweetness. Besides, when you pass on, we have to think about practical things. This house, your belongings. We don't want Justin to deal with a legal mess. They were planning my death, discussing my inheritance in front of me as if I were already a ghost. In fact, Sloane continued, it'd be good if you gave us a copy of your will to keep everything in order, just to avoid surprises. Justin nodded. It's logical, Mom. We're your only family. Aiden is your only grandson. Everything you have will eventually be ours anyway. Better to have it clear now. I looked at both of them, my son with his expression of impatience, my daughter-in-law with her calculated smile, my grandson who didn't know who I was, and something inside me hardened permanently. I'll think about it, I finally said. Justin frowned. There's not much to think about, Mom. But he didn't insist. They left quickly, leaving me in my house with a silence that weighed like lead. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. I need to update my will, and I want it absolutely airtight. Over the following weeks, I restructured everything. My restaurants, my properties, my bank accounts. I created trusts for loyal employees. I designated donations to charitable organizations. For Justin, I decided to leave him exactly what he thought I had, my modest house and $10,000 in a savings account. The rest, the millions he knew nothing about, would go to people who truly valued what Bob and I built. But I still didn't tell him anything. I still hoped in some foolish corner of my heart that he would wake up, that he would go back to being the boy who hugged me and said, I love you, Mom. I kept answering when he called, asking for money. I kept swallowing the humiliations. I continued to be the invisible mother he needed only when it was convenient for him. Until tonight, until he tried to kick me out of my own restaurant like I was dirt. I walked to my car parked 2 blocks down, the same old car Justin criticized. Tears blurred my vision. My phone rang. It was Renee. Where are you? Tony called me. He told me everything. Her voice trembled with fury. Maggie, stop. Stop protecting them. Stop hiding. It's time for them to know who you really are. I can't, I told Renee, my voice breaking. They're my family. He's my son? I heard her sigh of frustration on the other end. Maggie, listen closely. Family doesn't treat you like this. Family doesn't humiliate you in public. Family doesn't use you like an ATM while spitting in your face. She was right. I knew it. But a mother's heart doesn't understand logic. Give me time, I pleaded. Just give me a little more time. Renee was silent for a long moment. Then softer. Okay, but promise me that when it's time to defend yourself, you will. Promise me you won't let them destroy you, I promised her, although I didn't know if I could keep it. I drove home with silent tears rolling down my cheeks, feeling that every mile was taking me not only away from the restaurant, but from the last scraps of hope I had left. The following days were strange. Justin didn't call to apologize, to explain, or even to ask for more money. Nothing. It was as if that night at the restaurant had never happened. As if publicly throwing me out was so normal it didn't even warrant a follow-up conversation. I continued my routine, discreetly visiting my other restaurants, reviewing financial reports, meeting with managers in private offices where no one saw me. On the outside, I was still Maggie, the simple widow. On the inside, I felt like a building with increasingly deep cracks about to give way. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the incident, Renee came to my house with information. She sat across from me in my small living room, her face grim. "You need to know something." My niece, the one in PR, told me more details. My stomach tightened. Justin and Sloane are in serious financial trouble. I leaned forward, my heart racing. "What kind of trouble?" Renee pulled out her phone, showing me screenshots. They've piled up over $200,000 in debt, maxed out credit cards, personal loans, all to keep up that lifestyle they show off on social media. $200,000. The figure hit me like a punch. "How is that possible?" Renee continued, her voice firm. "European trips on Instagram. That exclusive midtown condo that runs $4,000 a month. Justin's sports car, Sloane's designer clothes, the elaborate parties. It's all a front, Maggie. It's all debt. They're broke." I leaned back on the sofa, processing the information. All this time, while they treated me like a beggar, they were sinking financially. All that arrogance, that contempt, was propped up on a mountain of lies and credit. "There's more," Renee added, her tone even darker. "The restaurant plan is real, but they have no capital. They're desperate to get investors. That's why they were at your restaurant that day with those people. They were potential investors Sloane was trying to impress." Everything finally clicked now. The over-the-top theatrics, the need to boot me. I'd ruined their carefully constructed image of a sophisticated, successful couple. A poor mother-in-law didn't fit the narrative they were selling. But here's the worst part. Renee hesitated, as if the next words physically hurt to say. "My niece overheard Sloane talking to a friend. She said that when you died, they were going to sell your house immediately. With that money, they'd pay off some debt and maybe get a down payment for the restaurant. My house, the home where I lived with Bob for 40 years, where we raised Justin, where every corner held memories of a life of love and work. To them, it was just an impending business transaction. They were basically waiting for me to die so they could cash in." Sloane had said the exact words. "Hopefully she hurries up. That area's appreciating. We could easily get $300,000. Renee took my hand, her eyes full of tears. "Maggie, they're speculating on your death, planning your funeral before you're even sick." I stood up, walked to the window, and looked at my small garden where Bob used to plant tomatoes. 66 years old. Statistically, I had perhaps 15 or 20 more years left. But to my son, that was too long to wait. I was more valuable dead than alive. "What are you going to do?" Renee asked softly. I turned toward her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something different from pain. I felt steel-spined determination. "I'm going to watch. I'm going to see exactly how far they're willing to go. And when the right time comes, I'm going to teach them a lesson they won't forget." The following weeks were revealing. I discreetly hired a private investigator, not because I wanted to snoop on my son, but because I needed the whole truth. The reports arrived weekly, each one more sickening than the last. Justin had lied on multiple loan applications, inflating his income. Sloane had pawned jewelry she later reported as stolen to collect the insurance. They borrowed money from friends with promises of investment returns they never intended to keep. The list of people they'd defrauded or deceived kept growing. But what hurt me most was discovering something about Aiden. My grandson was being used. Sloane took him to charity events, snapped photos, and posted sappy messages about giving to those less fortunate. Then she received donations from followers who thought she was genuinely helping charities. The money went straight into her personal account. She was using the innocence of her own son as a tool for emotional fraud. That information flipped a switch in me. It was no longer just about me. It was about justice, about stopping two people who clearly had no moral limits. I began to move quietly. First, I spoke with my lawyers about fully protecting my assets. Then I discreetly started to investigate the supposed investors Justin and Sloane were courting. It turned out some were decent people being misled with phony projections and impossible promises. I considered contacting them, warning them, but Renee stopped me. "Not yet. You need the perfect moment, the moment when the impact is maximum." Meanwhile, Justin finally called me. 3 weeks had passed since the restaurant incident. His voice sounded strained. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. My heart, that foolish organ that still wanted to believe in miracles, skipped a beat. Are you and Aiden okay? There was a pause. Yeah, we're fine. I just need to see you. Can I come by tomorrow? I accepted, of course. I cooked his favorite meal. I cleaned the house. A part of me still hoped he'd come to apologize, to acknowledge what he had done, to say those magic words. I'm sorry, Mom. He arrived punctually, but alone. No Sloane, no Aiden. He sat in the same spot where he'd told me weeks earlier that I was a burden. This time his body language was different, nervous, restless. Mom, I need your help. No, how are you? No apology for the restaurant. Just I need. What's wrong, son? He rubbed his face, a gesture of stress. I have temporary liquidity problems, about $500,000. It's for an investment I can't pass up. I'll pay you back in 3 months, with interest if you want. 3 times more than he had ever asked for. $500,000 is a lot of money, Justin. He leaned forward, his voice acquiring that slick, manipulative tone I now knew too well. Mom, it's a unique opportunity. I'm going to triple that money. I could finally give you a better life. Get you out of this house, move you somewhere more comfortable. Move me, as if I were a package that needed relocating. And if I don't have that amount? His expression hardened. Mom, I know you have savings. Dad was careful. There must be something. You can take out a loan against the house if you have to. Against my house. He wanted me to mortgage my home to hand him money he'd never return. Let me think about it, I said at last. His face pinched in frustration. There's no time to think. I need the money this week. 3 days, max. He stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. You always do this. You always complicate things. Just tell me yes. It's simple. I really looked at him. My son, the baby I breastfed, the child I nursed when he was sick, the teenager whose dreams I supported without question. And I found none of that child in the man in front of me. I need to think about it, I repeated, firmer this time. He exploded. For God's sake, Mom, what is there to think about? I'm your son, your only family. Don't you trust me? The irony was so brutal I almost laughed. I'll give you an answer in 3 days, I said with a calm I didn't feel. He scoffed, grabbed his jacket. Fine, but don't make me beg. I don't have time for drama. He slammed the door. I remained sitting in my empty living room, the food I'd prepared untouched in the kitchen, and I made a decision. It was time to stop being a victim. It was time for Justin and Sloane to face the consequences of their actions. I called Tony. I need your help organizing something that will change everything. His response was immediate. Whatever you need, Mrs. Johnson, whatever it is. The plan began to take shape, and this time I wasn't backing down. Over the next 3 days, I worked in silence. Tony and I met in the administrative office of my flagship restaurant, the one Bob and I designed together 20 years ago. It was our pride, the most elegant in the chain. Glass walls with a skyline view, a state-of-the-art kitchen, a wine list that could stand with the best European rooms, and absolutely no one in my family knew it was mine. Mrs. Johnson, Tony said, sitting across from me with a folder full of documents, I need you to explain exactly what you want to achieve. I can arrange anything you ask, but I need to understand the endgame. I leaned back in the leather chair, the same one Bob used to sit in to review menus and accounts. I want Justin and Sloane to see who I truly am, but not privately. I need it public, irreversible. I want the blow so strong they can't deny it or spin it afterward. Tony nodded slowly. Are you sure? Once your identity is revealed, everything changes, not just with them, but for your whole life. I thought for a moment. My quiet life, my comfortable anonymity, all of it would disappear. But what was the point of that peace if it came with constant humiliation? I'm sure, I said finally. It's time my son learned that respect isn't optional. Tony opened the folder, showing me calendars and lists. According to my contacts, Justin and Sloane have a crucial dinner set for this Friday. They're bringing their potential investors here to this restaurant. It's their last shot at getting the capital. If they fail, the plan collapses. Perfect. It was almost too perfect. How did you get that? Tony smiled slightly. Sloane made the reservation 2 weeks ago for 8. She requested the main table, the one in the center. She wants everyone to see the meeting. She wants a spectacle of success. Of course she does. Everything with Sloane was performance. Everything was facade. Then here's my plan, I said, leaning forward. I'll be here that night at my usual corner table, dressed as always, simple, invisible. I'll let everything unfold naturally. Tony frowned. And if they try to kick you out again? If what happened 3 weeks ago repeats? I smiled, and it was a smile with no warmth. I hope they try to kick me out in front of their investors. I hope they humiliate me one more time. Then, and only then, you'll reveal exactly who I am, but not with simple words. Bring the deeds, the business registrations, the property documents. I want physical evidence they can't refute. Tony looked at me with a mix of admiration and concern. Mrs. Johnson, this is going to destroy them, especially in front of people they're trying to do business with. I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. A mother, after all, but I pressed it down deep. They destroyed me first. Every day, with every slight, with every humiliation, they chipped away at me, betting I was too weak or too foolish to notice. It's time they faced real consequences. We spent the next few hours refining every detail. Tony would discreetly contact some investors, not to reveal anything, but to ensure they actually showed. I would coordinate with my lawyers to have certified copies of all relevant documents. On Wednesday, Justin called again, his voice borderline desperate. Mom, the 3 days are up. Do you have the money? I took a deep breath. No, Justin. I am not giving you $500,000. Silence. Then his voice dropped dangerously low. You're telling me no? It was the first time in my life I had directly denied him money. That's right. I can't give you that amount. I heard his quickened breath. You can't or you won't. There's a difference. His tone was accusatory, furious. Mom, I've asked very little over the years. I've never demanded anything. The one time I really need something important, you turn your back on me. Very little. Years of thousands he never repaid. Years of being his personal ATM, and he called it very little. My decision is final, Justin exploded. Unbelievable. You're my mother. You're supposed to support me, but it's always been like this. Selfish, thinking only of yourself. Dad was the generous one. You just hoard and stockpile like a miser. And who had given him every dime he asked for. Who would have given my life for him without hesitation. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said, my voice trembling but firm. If you genuinely need help, we can talk other options. I can help you budget, consolidate debt. I don't need your poor people advice, he cut in, venomous. I needed that money, and you failed me, as always. The line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, feeling the last threads of hope snap completely. I called Renee. My voice was barely a whisper. I did it. I told him no. She exhaled in relief. Good, Maggie. I'm proud of you. I know it was hard. Hard didn't begin to describe it. It felt like amputating part of my soul, but it was necessary. Friday is the day, I told her. The day everything changes. Renee promised to be nearby if I needed her. I spent the following days in a strange calm. I knew a storm was coming, but for the first time in years, I was the one steering it. Friday arrived, overcast and cold. I dressed in my usual clothes, gray slacks, a cream-colored cardigan, comfortable shoes, nothing special. I checked myself in the mirror before leaving. 66 years looked back at me, wrinkles around my eyes, hair more silver than brown, hands marked by decades of work. This was me, Maggie. Not the powerful businesswoman, not the owner of a culinary empire. Just me. And finally, after years of hiding, I was going to let both versions meet in the open. I drove to the restaurant, my heart thudding loudly. I arrived early at 7 Sour. Justin's reservation was for 8:30. Tony Harper greeted me at the private entrance. Everything's ready, Mrs. Johnson. The documents are in my office. The key staff know what to do when you give the signal. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He led me to my usual table, that quiet corner where I could see the entire restaurant without being the center of attention. I ordered only tea. I couldn't eat. My stomach was a tight knot of nerves and anticipation. I watched as the restaurant gradually filled. Elegant couples, business groups, family celebrations, normal life rolling along while I waited for the moment that would change my life forever. At 8:20, the main doors opened. And there he was, my son. Justin walked in with Sloane on his arm, followed by 6 people in expensive suits, the investors. Sloane wore an emerald green dress that probably cost more than my car. Dazzling jewelry, perfect makeup. Justin, impeccable as always, smiling with that polished confidence he had perfected. They didn't see me, not yet. Tony greeted them personally and led them to the central table exactly as Sloane had requested, the table where everyone could see them, where they could shine. I took a deep breath. The show was about to begin. I watched from my corner as they settled at the central table. Sloane was in her element, laughing too loudly, brushing the investors' arms with calculated familiarity. Justin spread out folders with financial projections, pointing to graphs with rehearsed enthusiasm. I recognized 2 of the investors from the photos my investigator had collected. Serious business people with real capital, the kind who could make or break a project with a single decision. Sloane immediately ordered champagne, the most expensive on the menu. I saw Justin hesitate for a second at the price, but Sloane ignored him. "Only the best for tonight," she declared, her voice carrying to my corner. "We're celebrating the start of something great." 20 minutes passed. I sipped my tea slowly, barely breathing. Then it happened. Sloane got up to go to the restroom, walking on those impossibly high heels that made her look more like a model than a real person. Her path took her directly in front of my table. Our eyes met. I saw her eyes widen in shock, then narrow with instant fury. She stopped dead, her mouth a hard line. She hurried back to the table and leaned in to whisper to Justin. I watched him turn his head, searching for me. When he found me, his expression cycled through surprise, shame, and finally anger. He rose from the table, apologizing to the investors with a tight smile. He walked toward me with rigid steps, Sloane trailing like an angry shadow. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my hand steady around my teacup. Justin reached my table, his voice low but vibrating with contained rage. "Mom, what are you doing here?" As if I needed permission to exist in public spaces. "I'm having dinner," I said simply. Sloane leaned over the table, her eyes like knives. "Seriously? After you refuse to help your own son, you come here to spend money? Do you even know how much this place costs?" In fact, I knew exactly, down to the last penny. Justin glanced nervously toward their table, where the investors watched with obvious curiosity. "Mom, this is very important to me. Please don't ruin this night. You can just leave." Every word was a slap, but I'd come too far to back down. "I have the right to be here like any customer," Sloane laughed, that cruel sound I knew too well. "Customer, please. I bet you can't even afford the cheapest dish on the menu." She turned, snapping for a waiter. "Excuse me, we need to speak to the manager. There's a situation that needs immediate attention." The waiter, a young man named Javier who had worked with me for 3 years, looked at me discreetly. I gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "Right away, ma'am," he said professionally, walking off. Justin rubbed his forehead, his body language screaming stress. "Mom, please, I'm begging you. These investors are my only chance. If I close this deal, I can pay you back all the money I've asked for. But I need you to leave now." All the money, as if he'd ever intended to return it. Sloane was done pretending to be discreet. Her voice rose several decibels. "This is ridiculous. First, she shows up at our favorite restaurant weeks ago, embarrassing us in front of friends. Now this? It's like she's stalking us." Stalking? I was the stalker for existing in the same space as them. Nearby diners were turning around now, murmurs rippling through the room. A couple at the next table whispered while they watched. An older man shook his head, clearly disapproving of the spectacle. Justin noticed the growing attention and grew even more nervous. "Sloane, lower your voice." But she was in full-on performative indignation mode. "Lower my voice? Why? I'm tired of dealing with this. Your mother doesn't understand boundaries. She doesn't understand her place." My place. I took a deep breath, every fiber of me wanting to scream the truth. But I held back. Not yet. Tony appeared then, walking with his quiet authority. "Good evening. I understand there's an issue." Sloane lunged at him like a predator. "Yes, there's a huge problem. This woman," she pointed at me as if I were evidence, "shouldn't be here. She's causing trouble. She's harassing my husband and me during a crucial business dinner. I need you to remove her immediately." Tony looked at me, his expression perfectly neutral. "Has the madam caused any disturbance?" Sloane scoffed. "Disturbance? Her presence is the disturbance. Look at how she's dressed. This is a high-end restaurant. You have dress codes, you have standards." Tony consulted a tablet, playing it by the book. "According to our records, the madam is a regular customer. She has dined here multiple times without incident." That only infuriated Sloane more. "I don't care how many times she's been here. She probably pays with coupons or promotions. We're real customers. We spend real money here." The investors at the central table were now fully focused on the scene. One of them, a distinguished man with silver hair, Mr. Arthur Davies, stood and walked toward us. "Justin, is there a problem?" His voice was deep, authoritative. Justin spun around, his fake smile snapping back into place. No, Mr. Davies, just a minor family misunderstanding. It's being handled." Mr. Davies studied me, curious. "Family?" Sloane rushed to fill the silence. "It's Justin's mother. She has issues, advanced age. Sometimes she gets confused and shows up in inappropriate places. We're trying to handle this discreetly. Issues. Senility by implication." She was painting me as confused in front of strangers. Mr. Davies frowned slightly. "I understand family situations can be delicate," but his tone had shifted. His expression carried disapproval, not toward me, but toward them. Tony stepped in, voice polite but firm. "Allow me to resolve this properly. Give me a moment and I'll consult with my supervisor on the best course of action." Sloane scoffed. "Supervisor? Bring the owner if you have to. I want someone with real authority. The owner." She wanted to speak to the owner. The irony was so perfect I almost laughed. Tony nodded professionally. "Of course. One moment." He walked toward the administrative offices. Time seemed to stall. Sloane returned to her table, talking animatedly to the investors, no doubt explaining the unfortunate situation with her troublesome mother-in-law. Justin lingered by my table a moment longer. "Mom?" His voice was barely a whisper, heavy with something that sounded like despair. "Why are you doing this? Why can't you just support me for once?" For once, as if decades of unconditional support counted for nothing. "Justin," I said at last, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm staying. I'm going to finish my dinner and you're going back to your investors to continue your meeting." His jaw tightened. "You are incredibly selfish." He turned and walked back to his table, leaving me with those words hanging in the air. Selfish. I was selfish for finally drawing a line, for finally existing in a space they considered theirs only. I watched Tony emerge from the offices, walking back with a leather binder in his hands. Our eyes met across the restaurant. He gave a small nod. It was time. The moment of truth that would change everything forever. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in the restaurant could hear it. Tony walked directly to Justin's table, not mine. The leather binder under his arm seemed to weigh a ton with the secrets it contained. The entire restaurant had caught on that something important was happening. Conversations at other tables had reduced to murmurs. Servers had stopped subtly, in positions where they could observe without being obvious. Sloane looked up when Tony arrived, her expression triumphant. "Finally. Have you spoken with the owner? Are you going to remove this woman?" Tony placed the binder on the table with a deliberate smoothness. "Ma'am, sir, I have consulted the situation with the appropriate person. Allow me to clarify a few aspects about this establishment." Justin interrupted, his voice strained. "Look, we just want to resolve this quickly. We're in the middle of an important meeting. If you could ask my mother to leave, we'd be very grateful. We can even leave a generous tip for the inconvenience. A tip? As if they could buy convenience. Tony maintained his perfect composure. Sir, before we proceed, you need to understand something fundamental about this restaurant. He opened the binder, taking out the first document, the official business registration with government seals and dates going back 22 years. This establishment, along with 6 other restaurants in the city, belongs to a family-owned business group. Sloane barely glanced at the document, too focused on her own indignation. That's very interesting, but I fail to see what it has to do with our situation. Tony continued, unperturbed. It has everything to do with it, ma'am. The majority owner of these establishments prefers to maintain a low profile. She doesn't seek publicity or recognition, but she is present more often than people imagine. He took out another document, this one with photographs. Photos of Bob and me at the opening of the first location. Photos of us at award ceremonies for the Culinary Association. Photos dating back decades. Mr. Davies leaned forward, squinting to see better. Wait, that woman in the photos? Sloane finally paid attention, picking up one of the documents. I watched her eyes scan the lines, her expression turning from irritation to confusion. I don't understand what this is. Tony pointed to a section of the property record. As you can see here, the current proprietor is Mrs. Maggie Johnson, Robert Johnson's widow. She inherited the entirety of the shares after her husband's passing 5 years ago. Since then, she has maintained and expanded operations with notable success. My full name on official documents that could not be refuted. Justin had gone completely motionless, his face gradually losing color. Wait, Maggie Johnson. Sloane shook her head, her voice rising again. This is ridiculous. This has to be a mistake. There must be another Maggie Johnson. It's a common name. Tony pulled out more documents. Property deeds. Financial statements with my signature. Chamber of Commerce certifications. Recent photos of administrative meetings where I clearly appeared. There is no mistake, ma'am. And to eliminate any doubt, he turned toward me, his posture shifting to one of absolute respect. He walked to my table while the entire restaurant held its breath. Madam Proprietor, I deeply regret that you had to witness this unpleasant situation. How would you like me to proceed, Madam Proprietor? The words fell into the silence like stones in still water. All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of dozens of gazes, but the only ones that mattered were my son's. Justin was standing now, his chair pushed back, his mouth open in absolute shock. Sloane had paled by 3 shades, the documents trembling in her hands. The investors exchanged knowing glances, clearly reevaluating the entire situation. I stood up slowly, my legs firmer than I expected. My voice, when it finally came out, sounded calm, calmer than I had felt in years. Tony, thank you for handling this with such professionalism. I walked toward the central table, each step feeling like miles. Justin instinctively backed away when I approached, as if I were a dangerous stranger instead of his mother. Mom, I didn't know. His voice broke mid-sentence. Sloane found her voice first, though it came out as a shriek. This can't be real. You can't be the owner. You live in that awful house. You drive that old car. You dress like... She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Like someone who doesn't need to impress anyone. I completed it for her. Like someone who built something real instead of a facade of appearances. Mr. Arthur Davies cleared his throat, his expression now clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Johnson, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Arthur Davies of Davies Capital Investments. I'm familiar with your reputation in the industry. Your restaurants are known for quality and exceptional management. He stood, offering his hand with genuine respect. I shook it, noting how Sloane watched with growing horror. Another investor, an elegant middle-aged woman named Iris Chen, also stood. Iris Chen, Crestwood Investment Fund. Mrs. Johnson, it's an honor. I've been trying to secure a meeting with you for months. Your operating numbers are impressive. Justin had backed up until he hit his chair, gripping it as if it were the only thing holding him upright. I don't understand why you never told me. Why did you let me think? His voice was barely a broken whisper. I looked him in the eyes for the first time in months, truly seeing him. Why did I let you think I was poor? Because I needed to see if you loved me without money. I wanted to know if your mother was worth anything to you beyond what I could give. The words came out with a pain I'd been holding back for years. And I got my answer, Justin. I got it every time you asked for money without asking how I was. Every time Sloane humiliated me and you stayed silent. Every time you kept me away from my grandson. Sloane gathered a shred of her earlier bravado, though it rang hollow now. You deceived us. You made us think you were nobody. I turned to her slowly. I didn't deceive you. You assumed. You saw modest clothes and decided I was worthless. You saw humility and mistook it for poverty. You saw simplicity and decided it meant stupidity. My voice rose slightly, years of humiliation hardening into words. You never asked about my life. You never cared how I paid the bills or where the money I kept giving you came from, because you didn't care. You just wanted what you could take while keeping me small enough to feel superior. The restaurant was in absolute silence. Even the servers stood motionless. Justin tried to approach, his hand extended. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I stopped him with a look. You didn't know what, Justin? You didn't know that treating me like trash was wrong? Did you need to know I had money to show basic respect? Tears began to stream down his cheeks. It wasn't my intention. Sloane interrupted, her voice now desperate. Maggie, can we explain? There have been misunderstandings, stress. Financial pressures made us act in ways. Her voice trailed off as I looked at her. Financial pressures. I pulled out my phone, opening the reports from my investigator. Are you referring to the $200,000 in debt? The insurance claim on the stolen jewelry? The posts using Aiden to solicit donations? Money that went straight to your personal account? I watched the color drain from her face. The investors had gotten up now, clearly wanting distance. Mr. Davies picked up his briefcase. I believe this isn't an appropriate conversation for us, Justin. I think our potential partnership needs to be reconsidered. The other investors murmured agreement and began to withdraw. Sloane watched them leave, her dream of funding crumbling before her eyes. The investors left one by one, leaving Justin and Sloane alone at that table that was supposed to be their triumph. The plates of expensive food remained untouched. The $300 bottle of champagne was warming in its ice bucket, bubbles fizzling out like my son's illusions. Sloane slumped into her chair, her emerald green dress, which had seemed a symbol of success moments ago, now looked like a costume. Justin was still standing, his hands trembling as he tried to process what had just happened. The entire restaurant watched, some diners with pity, others with a certain grim satisfaction at the drama. I remained there, feeling the weight of 66 years condensed into this single moment. Mom, Justin finally found his voice a broken croak. Please, can we fix this? I can explain everything. I took a step toward him, keeping enough distance to see his whole face. Explain what exactly? Explain why 3 weeks ago you tried to kick me out of this very restaurant? Explain why you've kept me from my grandson for 2 years? Explain why, every time you looked at me, you saw shame instead of pride? Each question was a precise thrust, aimed at the heart of years of accumulated pain. Justin shook his head, tears running freely now. I love you, Mom. You're my mother. You've always been important to me. I felt my throat tighten, but I pushed it down. I had cried enough in private. Now was the time for truths. Don't confuse needing me with loving me, Justin. You needed me as a source of money. You needed me as an emotional safety net when it suited you. Loving me would have meant respecting me even when you thought I had nothing to offer. I pointed at Sloane, now weeping silently, her makeup running down her cheeks. She showed you who to be and you chose it. You chose surface over substance. And the most painful part is that you chose her approval over your mother's love. Sloane looked up, voice snagging between sobs. I'm sorry, Maggie. I really am. I came from a family where appearances were everything, where status defined your worth. I didn't know how to be different. It was the first time I'd heard her sound genuine, vulnerable. But apologies after being caught always sound different from apologies born of real remorse. Sloane, I said, softer but firm, you had countless chances to know me, beyond my clothes or my house. Every time I cooked for you, every time I knitted for Aiden, every time I offered help, you could have seen me as a person. You chose to see an obstacle. Tony discreetly approached, leaning down to speak quietly. Mrs. Johnson, would you like privacy? I can prepare a private room. I considered it. Part of me wanted to end this away from curious eyes. But another part, the part that had been humiliated publicly so many times, needed this to be public too. No, Tony, thank you. This needs to end here, where it began. He nodded, got the message, backing away, but stayed close in case I needed him. Justin took a step toward me, his arms half open as if wanting to hug me. Mom, please give me another chance. I can change. We'll be different. Sloane and I can learn. Just don't abandon us. Don't abandon them. The irony was brutal. Justin, you abandoned me first years ago when you decided I didn't fit the life you wanted to show off. I took a deep breath, knowing the next words might change our relationship forever. I came tonight not to humiliate you. I came because you needed to face real consequences. You needed to learn that actions have weight, that you can't treat people like they're disposable and expect them to be there when you finally need them. I pulled an envelope from my handbag. One. I'd prepared days ago with my lawyer. I placed it on the table in front of Justin. What is this? He asked, his voice trembling. It's a letter from my attorney. It explains how I've restructured my will and my assets. I saw his eyes widen with panic. Mom, no. I interrupted him, raising my hand. Listen to me all the way through. Your inheritance now consists of the house where you grew up and $10,000 in cash. The rest, my properties, restaurants, and investments, will go into a trust that benefits my loyal employees, organizations that feed people in need, and an education fund for Aiden, which he'll receive at 25, run by independent third parties. Justin took the envelope with trembling hands, pulling out the documents. Sloane read over his shoulder, her face moving from shock to absolute despair. You can't do this, Maggie, she whispered. We're your family. Aiden is your grandson. My heart broke a little more, but I kept my voice firm. Precisely because Aiden is my grandson, I made these provisions. He'll have access to school, opportunity, and security when he's grown, and you won't be able to touch or steer it. Hopefully, he'll learn that money comes with responsibility and respect. Justin dropped the papers on the table, covering his face with his hands. His sobs were deep, wrenching. A maternal part of me wanted to comfort him, to hug him like when he was a child with nightmares. But he wasn't a child anymore. He was a man who'd made deliberate choices for years. This doesn't mean I'm cutting you out of my life, I continued, feeling my own tears threaten. But it does mean our relationship has to be rebuilt from scratch, with honesty, mutual respect, and no more money changing hands. I looked directly at Sloane. And it means that if you want me in Aiden's life, it'll be under different terms, not as the embarrassing grandmother you keep hidden, but as a real part of his life, or nothing at all. Sloane opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Justin lifted his face, red and swollen from crying. What do we have to do? Tell me how to fix this. It was the wrong question. It's not about doing something to get my money back, Justin. It's about doing something because you truly want to be better, because you care how your actions land on other people, because you want your son to grow up seeing real values, not hypocrisy. I stooped to meet his eyes. When your father died, I lost my partner in life, but I thought I still had my son. Learning I was valuable to you only when there was something to take was worse than any widowhood. My voice finally broke on that last word. Hot tears rolled down my cheeks. It hurt every day, every slight, every time Sloane insulted me and you said nothing. Every photo of Aiden online knowing I couldn't be there. Justin reached out his hand. And this time I didn't reject it. I took it, feeling his cold, trembling fingers. I am so sorry, Mom. More sorry than I can say. I squeezed his hand briefly, then let go. I know, and maybe one day that I'm sorry will be enough to rebuild something real. But today isn't that day. I straightened up, wiping my tears with dignity. Tony instantly appeared at my side, offering me a clean handkerchief. I took it gratefully, wiping my face. The restaurant remained in a solemn silence. Everyone present had witnessed an intimate and devastating moment. I turned to the diners, my voice clear. I apologize for the spectacle. Please continue your dinners. Champagne is on the house tonight, compliments of management. A slow applause started at a table in the back, then spread. It wasn't the joyful, celebratory kind. It was something deeper, more respectful. It was recognition. It was solidarity. It was people who had seen an injustice corrected, pain named and dignity reclaimed. I walked toward the exit with my head held high, Tony escorting me. Behind me, I heard Justin call out one last time. "Mom, wait." I stopped but didn't fully turn. "I'm going to change. I promise." My voice came out soft but firm. "Don't do it for me, Justin. Do it for you. Do it for Aiden. Do it because it's right." And then I left the restaurant, stepping into the cold night, feeling something heavy finally lift off my chest. The night was cold and clear when I left. The stars looked sharp, a clarity I hadn't noticed in years. Renee was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against her car. When she saw me, she ran to me and hugged me without a word. I let her hold me, finally letting myself collapse now that I was away from all those eyes. I cried on her shoulder, not only from pain but from relief. Relief at finally speaking the truth, setting boundaries, and refusing to swallow my dignity to keep a fake peace. "You did it," Renee murmured in my ear. "I'm so proud of you." We stayed like that for several minutes until my tears dried and my breathing calmed. I drove home in silence, Renee following to make sure I got there safe. My small house greeted me with its familiar comfort. The walls Justin had despised, the furniture Sloane had called shameful. Everything looked different now. Not better or worse, just different. As if I'd recovered something I'd lost without even knowing it. I made tea and sat on my old sofa, the same one where Bob used to read the Sunday paper. Renee sat beside me, waiting me out. "Do you think I was too hard?" I finally asked. She shook her head firmly. "You were fair. There's a big difference between being hard and refusing to enable abuse." The following days were strange. My phone rang constantly. Justin called several times a day, apologizing, explaining, pleading. Sloane called too, her tone swinging between genuine remorse and thinly veiled desperation. I didn't answer for the first week. I needed quiet. I needed to process decades of pain I'd shoved down. Tony kept me posted about the restaurant. The story had leaked through the city's business circles. A few local outlets tried to reach me for interviews. I declined them all. This wasn't a story for public consumption. It was my life, my family, my private grief. 2 weeks later, I received a letter, not a text or an email, a handwritten letter on good paper. It was from Justin. I opened it with trembling hands and read words that felt deeper than anything he'd said in years. He wrote about therapy he'd started, honest talks with Sloane about values and priorities, selling the pricey condo and downsizing, getting real work instead of schemes, wanting Aiden to grow up knowing the value of honest work and respect for all people, no matter how they look. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask me to undo the inheritance changes. At the end, he asked for a chance to rebuild something real. I cried reading that letter, not from sadness, but from something more complicated. Hope mixed with caution, love mixed with self-protection. I replied with my own handwritten note. I told him I appreciated his words, but long-term actions would speak louder than any promise. I said I was willing to try slowly, with clear boundaries, that we could start with occasional coffees, conversations with no agenda, rebuilding trust brick by brick, and that more than anything, I wanted to know my grandson, really know him, if they truly allowed it. A month later, we had our first coffee in a neutral spot, not at my restaurant or in their neighborhood. Just the three of us, Justin, Sloane, and me. It was awkward at first, forced small talk, long silences, but there was something different in their eyes. Less arrogance, More humility. Sloane apologized. No excuses, no spin, just owning the harm. I didn't forgive her on the spot. Real forgiveness takes time, but I acknowledged the effort. Justin talked about his new job, modest, honest pay, and how he felt lighter without the pressure of impossible appearances, about telling Aiden that kindness and respect matter, even at 2 years old. 3 months after the restaurant incident, I finally met Aiden properly. Justin and Sloane invited me to a public park. My grandson ran between the swings, laughter in the air. When he saw me, he hesitated. I was a stranger. Justin knelt to his level, pointing to me. Aiden, this is your grandma Maggie, the one who made that scarf you love. I'd kept knitting for him, sending gifts through Justin, not expecting credit. Aiden looked at me with big, curious eyes, then ran over with the absolute trust only kids have. He hugged my legs. I felt my heart break and rebuild at once. We spent the afternoon playing. Aiden showed me how to climb the slide, how to swing, how to look for bugs under rocks. Justin and Sloane watched from a nearby bench, giving us space but staying present. When the sun dipped, Aiden yawned in my arms, his head heavy on my shoulder. "Grandma, you smell nice," he murmured, sleepy. Those simple words meant more than any fancy apology. They meant future. They meant possibility. They meant that maybe, just maybe, something good could grow out of all this pain. The rebuilding was slow. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns tried to creep back. But something was fundamentally different. Honesty, respected boundaries, real effort. Justin started visiting regularly, not when he needed something, but simply to be there, to ask about my day, to hear stories about his father he'd never wanted to hear. Sloane surprised me by becoming a humble student. She asked about the restaurant work, the decisions, how Bob and I built something that lasted, not to copy, but to learn values she'd never been taught. 6 months later, on my 67th birthday, Justin organized a small dinner, not at some fancy venue, but at my house. He cooked the meal himself, using recipes I'd taught him as a boy and he'd forgotten. Sloane brought flowers from the local market, not pricey arrangements. Aiden gave me a crayon drawing, crooked lines meant to be him and me. I hung it on my fridge where it still sits. That night, after Aiden fell asleep on my old sofa, Justin took my hand. "Thank you for not giving up on us, for giving us the chance to be better." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you for taking it, for choosing real change instead of just saying words. Today, 2 years after that night at the restaurant, my life is different, and also the same. I still live in my modest house. I still drive my old car. I still dress simply. But now Justin understands those choices aren't about poverty, they're about values. I still manage my restaurants. Sometimes Justin tags along to admin meetings, genuinely learning the business, not to inherit it, but to understand his father's legacy. Sloane started working for a real charity, using her social skills for actual causes instead of self-promotion. And Aiden, my sweet Aiden, comes over twice a week. We bake cookies. I tell him about his grandpa. I teach him that people's worth isn't in clothes or houses, but in their hearts and actions. Reconciliation didn't erase the pain. The scars remain. Some days I remember the humiliations and they still sting. Some moments I see Justin and Sloane and a part of me stays cautious, guarding my heart. But there are also real laughs, real connection, love learning to exist without conditions or transactions. I learned that setting boundaries isn't cruelty. Demanding respect isn't selfish. Protecting your dignity doesn't make you less loving. And I learned it's never too late to teach, even your grown children, that every person deserves basic humanity, no matter their bank account or wardrobe. That night at the restaurant changed everything, not because I revealed my wealth, but because I finally revealed my worth. And that worth never depended on how many restaurants I own or how much money sits in the bank. It rests in my humanity, my dignity, my right to be respected simply for existing. Bob would have been proud, not of the empire we built, but of the woman who finally defended it when it mattered. Today, I dine at that same restaurant often, sometimes alone, enjoying the quiet. sometimes with Renee, celebrating a friendship that never bent, and sometimes with Justin, Sloane, and Aiden, building new memories on the ashes of the old. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. It's chosen, and it's protected, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because in the end, the only thing we truly own is our dignity, and no one can take that from you unless you hand it over. If you enjoyed this story, thank you for listening. Drop a comment with your city, and if you'd like to support future stories, a super thanks goes a long way. Make sure to subscribe for more. 2 new life stories are on your screen. With love and respect.